Hi, I'm Sierra. Welcome to Mindful Business, weekly discussions about mindfulness, entrepreneurship, and Web3. This live Twitter space is about an hour long. It's recorded and uploaded to YouTube to be played back anytime in podcast format. This is episode 30, Creating a Sacred Space. I'm joined by my lovely co-host Abby, the creator of Elevate, as usual. How you doing, Abby?
I'm doing all right. I learned of a friend's passing today, and so I'm grieving and a little bit shocked, but I'm doing all right. And I just want to say rest in peace to Rob Robar, who was an amazing human being, who reminded everyone to just live in the moment and sing and dance and hug a lot. So sending hugs to you, my friend. How are you on this fine day?
I'm so sorry for your loss, Abby. I guess this conversation is like oddly kind of fitting, given that a sacred space can be somewhere where people go to like kind of seek peace and prayer and, you know, refuge from their grief and loss. So I'm sorry about that. I'm doing okay. I've been really busy. I had yoga teacher training over the weekend. As I mentioned to you, I'm getting closer to graduation, but I am getting busier as I'm trying to wrap up this 200 hours. So I've just been running all around and kind of neglecting my own personal sacred spaces. So I feel like this conversation is well timed. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think it is perfectly timed. And I almost reached out before the space and thought, you know what, we'll just talk about it in the space because I had the same thought. And I know you have been, as we say, burning the candle at both ends. And I think this is so well timed because it's so important to have some dedicated space for yourself where you can turn things off mentally, whatever that might be. I'm really excited to kind of dig into this today, and talk about really. I know you already have a list prepared probably of things you want to get to on this subject, but I have been obsessed with the idea of this honestly since way back. I told you that you could find me at age 13 in the back of the library with the like Time Life series books on like witchcraft and candle magic and all these things. Some kids were looking at I don't know what at 13, but I was back looking at like metaphysical stuff that felt very taboo at that age. But it talked a lot about a lot of these things that kind of led me on this path talked about the idea of having a sacred space or an altar space. And so, yeah, I know this looks a lot of different ways to a lot of different people. So I was excited to hear what kind of what you wanted to dig into first, I guess, with this subject today.
Oh my goodness. Yes, there is so much to be said here. And I feel like we should preface with like, obviously, there's no wrong way. And our discussion and conversation, like, we're just drawing from personal experience, tips, suggestions. Like, there's truly no wrong way to do this. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it, similar to art. The best thing is to just do what feels comfortable and natural to you. Sacred space is one of those things when you Google sacred space, there is an overwhelming amount of like information, suggestions. Some of them are contradictory, specific types of sage and incense and candles and crystals to use. And, you know, while any of these things could be a great addition to your space, I want to start by saying I think it's most important that you feel comfortable and at peace in the space you're creating. And as Abby mentioned, that looks different for all of us. And I saw, Abby, that you posted this really beautiful video right before the spaces of what you referred to as one of your own sacred spaces. And it looked like there was a nice fireplace, a yoga mat, maybe some candles. So yeah. What are you feeling right now?
So, really, in the last 6 months, I really started dedicating this space in my bedroom to being my practice space. I've had lots of different personal practice spaces over the years for my yoga, my meditation, and like my place to go and unwind. It's been a lot of different places, but as you know, I went through a lot of life changes in this last year. And it was 6 months ago that my ex-husband moved out, and I started kind of shifting my personal living space into my own space. And so there's been a real energy makeover that I've been kind of intentional about over the last 6 months, really since the last, the new moon in Virgo in August. I really kind of started this shift. And I tweak it all the time. And like every week, I kind of do something a little bit different. And this week, with the full moon in Virgo, I had cleansed all my crystals by the light of the full moon in that window that you see in that picture. I get the full moon through that window in my bedroom. And so I had just charged everything and cleaned and dusted and kind of intentionally swept the space of any kind of negative. That's why I love full moon ritual, which we talked about in previous episodes, I think last month. Why I love that is because it also, on a practical level, gets me to like get the dust out of the corners and things like this. And since I did that, then I kind of rearranged things slightly again to just set that intention for this to be my place of refuge, my place of peace. It's where I come to decompress, where I come to unwind. If I'm going to do any sort of meditative practice these days, I'm doing it in this space where I've set to be my sacred space. And like I said, I've had many different iterations of what a sacred space looks like to me over the years, but I'm really excited to be settling into what feels like my home and my space and my energy to be filling the corners of this room. And it's been really healing. It's been really healing. What about you? Do you have a dedicated space for your yoga, for your practice? And I also, before I hand it over, I think those can be different things too. I think we can have a space where we practice yoga, and there can be a different kind of dedicated, more meditative, prayerful space. I don't think they have to be the same. What does it look like for you?
I'm glad you mentioned that our sacred space really does evolve as we grow as individuals. And that it is this kind of evolving journey. But ultimately it's always this place where you can kind of find peace and unwind. And a lot of that has to do with intentionally surrounding yourself with what makes you feel good. And we're all so different. So this is different for everyone. Like your sacred space has like a yoga mat, and your crystals. Someone else's sacred space might have like some rosary beads and like a cross, you know? So your sacred space could even just be somewhere where you lay down and relax and read. Um, Maybe it's somewhere where you reflect or you meditate before you start work in the morning. Everyone has different preferences. Some people like incense, some people like candles, some people decorate the walls with paintings and posters. It takes time to cultivate a space that suits you. And I feel like I want to start by saying it's important to be patient and be open to your space changing and growing. And as Abby said, as you journey through life, your space will evolve. So, like, don't feel like there's this pressure on you to get it right or figure it out or like have the best space ever. It's like it just needs to be a space that makes you feel good. So, my own sacred space has some of my favorite herbal sprays and oils, some live plants, some crystals for my personal collection. People always joke with me, like, oh, you probably have so many crystals since you have this store. And surprisingly, I have a pretty like moderately sized crystal collection. Like they can fit in a very small little area and corner. I have more inventory for the store than anything. So some of my crystals, some of my warm, cozy like blankets and pillows. I like to keep a lot of my like self help books and spiritual books and kind of reference materials, and I also like to keep a little Bluetooth speaker that I'll use to play sound frequencies or instrumentals or jazz music. Um, I recently added a crystal singing bowl and a weighted blanket. Those were gifts from my husband within this last year, and they also really kind of amped up the peaceful, cozy vibes. But I will say, I moved into a new house with my husband a couple years ago, and I have moved all around the house. I've been in probably three different areas of the house. Like, it's taking me time to find my flow and find my comfort zone of like what is the right space, what is the right area. And I'm sure Abby knows knows what I mean. Sometimes my husband will walk into a room and be like, "Oh, she's moving stuff around." she, she's moving stuff around. She's reorganizing. It takes sometimes it takes me several iterations to find my comfort zone. So I do want to say, like, take your time and be intentional about it. It's all about what makes you feel good. What feelings is that eliciting for you, Abby?
Oh my gosh, you're hitting the nail on the head because I've gone through similar process before as well. You kind of have to try it on for size, right? And it might look good on paper. Oh, this would be a good spot. You're limited, also until you do buy a home that you settle into. You are living apartment life or moving into different rentals where you don't feel like you can really inhabit a space, or maybe you have a roommate who is like, what the fuck is all this? I don't want clutter out. I don't want these weird things or whatever. So, definitely I think being flexible with what this looks like and feels like, and it's just having these little meaningful pieces. For many years, it would be a little shelf somewhere. Here in this home, for many, many years, my kitchen windowsill, and even now, my kitchen windowsill is its own sacred space. I spent a lot of time there. And over the years, when the kids were little, I spent a ton of time there watching them in the backyard, playing, coming back and forth, cleansing my crystals there, having my little plants and greenery. A lot of magic happens in a kitchen, right? In a witch's kitchen, in a mother's kitchen. A lot of love gets baked into things and cooked into things. A lot of worry gets stirred into and out of recipes as you do a lot of things with intention in your kitchen. And so for many years I didn't really feel like I had my own space where I could set up a big mat and do what you see in this picture today. For years it was a little ledge on my kitchen, and over years prior to that, before being a mother, when I really started getting into spirituality, I was like a little forest goblin. I would find a little, a little glass jar or bottle or bead or bauble or feather. Oh my God. I was worse than my kids, picking up feathers and God knows what out on my nature walks. And things that would be absolute trash to any normal human being. I'm like a little crow. It's shiny. I'm gonna pick it up, and it's magic to me. This little stick looks like bone. Cool, And for years it was that kind of stuff, gathering, much to my mother's and former roommates and whomever's dismay, these weird little things that I would gather either on a shelf or a couple bookshelves, or yeah, probably almost always I've had an affinity for that kitchen shelf somewhere, or a little spot in my bedroom where I would burn a little candle. I still have these strange, cute, cool little boxes, colorful little wooden boxes that I would keep little crystals or little whatever it might be, dried herbs inside of. And to this day, you can find random bits of flotsam and jetsam if you dig deep enough in some of my stuff. So I think being flexible and being open, and as you said, it's just really about the intention and kind of gathering pieces that speak to you. If it makes you feel a certain way inside, if it brings you any sort of peace or calm or sense of wonder and joy, grab that thing and make it your special thing, and know that your seasons change. It may not be special to you in 10 years or 2 years. So, you may feel called to give it a new home and send it with someone else or whatever it might be. So I love that we're having this conversation, because it's a good reminder that things ebb and flow, including what your space might look like, but we continue the intention and the effort of creating this space. Because if we don't have a place to go to, then that stress just really accumulates in our lives. And having a space set up already, even if it's like a little traveling kit, right? Maybe you don't have a place in your home, but you love going to the park. So you take a little bag with you of your favorite crystals and whatever it might be, so that you can have a little traveling sacred space in your car or whatever. But having it ready to go, so that when things are feeling like, okay, pressure cooker's on, I need to release this steam, I need to have this space where I can let go and find peace. If it's already set up, you can just easily step into it, and even the moving in the direction of that place you have set up begins that process of helping you shift out of that place of stress and chaos and into that place of peace that you've set up for yourself. What do you think about mobile sacred spaces? Do you ever think about well, I bet you do, with you traveling with your crystals and stuff. I bet you have your own little travel kit, don't you?
The to go sacred space. Yes, Lord. That's why I make our energy protection mist. That is my to go sacred space. I legit keep that in my car, in my purse, and I spray it on myself and things, and it's like a reset. Yeah, I always have. I posted a tweet a few weeks ago. It was I'm sorry. I just think it's so funny. I was going through TSA, and this always happens. The woman going through my bag, they pulled it out, and she was like, she's like, "You got a rock in here?" And I was like, "Yes, ma'am. Actually, I do." She was like, did you find it?" I was like, "No, I bought it." And she thought that it was even more strange than the fact that I had a rock in there. It was the fact that I paid for it and I didn't find it. Oh, Lord. I always have a rock with me, or sometimes I'll just wear like crystal jewelry and stuff, and or like evil eye jewelry. I feel like there are different ways that you can kind of bring your sacred space on the go. And I love that you always bring the wisdom of a mother to mindful business. I love your windowsill sacred space. Like, I can totally understand the concept. And, I do feel like a lot of people think to have a sacred space, you need to limit distractions. It absolutely needs to be a private area where there's no foot traffic from other family members or roommates. And depending on your circumstances, like this can be easier said than done. And if there's no space in your home that can be dedicated to this purpose, like sometimes you really just have to like shove yourself into a free corner in the living room or your bedroom, or as Abby mentioned, the windowsill in the kitchen. Ideally, it's a space that you can keep somewhat free of clutter, but what's most important is that it's a space that you can focus on your inner work and your gratitude and your reflection, which can be difficult. I must say it can be difficult when the TV is blaring, in the next room, or there's a baby crying. But as Abby mentioned, it is this process of adapting your space and your practice to your own life, and you got to get in where you fit in sometimes. It's like if there's a time of day when the kids are gone or your family is out working or shopping, take advantage of that quiet time to devote to your spiritual practice. Make it work for you, even if it's just a few minutes of quiet time in your sacred space. It's better than nothing at all. What do you think, Abby?
100% true. And I'm glad that you mentioned jewelry. I was thinking earlier today, I wanted to bring that up, and it had slipped my mind. So I'm glad you brought that up too, because honestly, I really think about adorning my body and my personal energy field and energy space when I kind of wear the same bracelets every day. And I change out my earrings and I change out my necklace, but I really choose my necklace and my bracelets, because of the different gemstones that I'm going to wear that day. I'm going to channel a certain energy or a certain vibe or whatever it might be. I'm picking that stuff to create a sacred space and field around me. And so I love that you brought that up, because really it's so much about the power of our mind, and then having these corresponding different things that can help increase our effort, our thoughts, our intention. It can really amplify that, right? And so, you know, creating that sacred space on your body as you walk around is perfect. It's what we I think what we should think about doing, and especially if you are limited, you don't have that space, you can just create it on your own self and give yourself 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to find a quiet space wherever it might be. Yeah, it's just such an important thing to work into our habits. It may not come naturally at first, but I think if we think about being dedicated to making time for ourselves, it's this self-care thing, right? Making time and creating a space so that when you do make the time, it's so much more supportive, right? It's this way of supporting this self-care plan you've put into to motion. Because otherwise, what happens if we don't have it? And we think, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to start that meditation practice. I'm going to start that breath control practice. I'm going to do 10 minutes of yoga tomorrow. Well, if you don't have a space already dedicated and set up for yourself, then chances are when tomorrow rolls around, when you said you were going to do it, you may not have the energy, and which is understandable, right? We're burning the candle at both ends all the time. So the more things we can set into place to support these choices we want to make for ourselves, the easier it's going to be, the better it's going to be, the more it all kind of comes together, and the more sustainable it is, right?
That is so true. I love that you mentioned that. And yes, like we have to be proactive in limiting barriers to us meeting our own goals. My husband always talks to me about how he makes it easier for him to wake up early and go to the gym because he takes his clothes out the night before, and he gets like the ground coffee and the French press like set up downstairs, and like he has this ritual in terms of like setting up the environment so that it enables him to accomplish his goal, which is to wake up early and go to the gym, by making it easier. So absolutely, I feel like the sacred space can be similar, and for a lot of people their sacred space is where they construct their altar. And for someone who's honoring their ancestors or practicing their faith, this is somewhere where maybe they're leaving offerings for their ancestors or for any religious deities they might believe in. Sometimes this is a place where people would keep different intuitive tools they use, like pendulum or tarot cards or prayer beads. Like I mentioned, like some people might have rosary beads and a cross. Your altar is also where you pray or meditate or do ritual work. I absolutely love when I see people leave money and rice and water and flowers on their altar as offerings for their ancestors. I just personally find it to be really beautiful. Or just in general, when people add different sentimental gifts and heirlooms from different living and deceased family members to their altar, it's just really sweet and really moving. I've also seen people have photos of Jesus or Mary or Buddhist statues or feng shui charms. I feel like it's important to be expansive because there are so many different tools that you can use and that are important in different faiths that you can use to make your sacred space suitable for you as an individual. And as we mentioned at the beginning, there's no wrong way. So yeah, what is this sparking for you, Abby?
I love that you brought up including maybe special items or special photos or things that kind of remind you of your connection to the past, that those things that are honoring tradition, that are honoring our ancestors, the people who have been here before, who kind of carved the path for our existence, for us to be here. Even if we don't really have, like myself, I don't unfortunately have a lot of personal connections to a lot of my family, a lot of the people that where I came from. I don't have those deep connections on a lot of levels. I have, however, had some really special people and like mentors and spiritual people in my life who have passed, and one lady in particular, Miss Sonia, and I do have her picture near where I kind of have an altar space. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I think that it is such a beautiful practice, and a lot of cultures and traditions practice this regularly, right? And I think that's such a special thing to mention. Same with special items, that someone's kind of energy and vibration, right, is connected to some of those special pieces that get passed on or handed down, or it might be it could be something as simple as a remembrance from someone's visitation, or some special thing, right? That kind of helps their memory and their presence and their energy live on, and it can kind of connect you to that world and to that presence as well. So I think that's a really special thing to mention. And as we're talking about that, it really is part of why I love, and I know you love, and everyone in this room, honestly, crystals, right? So very much when you hold a crystal in your hand and you think about how long has this been here, and what other hands might have touched it, or have seen it, when it was in the earth, and for how many generations, and to think about our lineage and how long it goes back and how deeply connected all of us really are. And I think by doing things like this, by doing ritual, by creating this sacred space, by bringing in elements that connect us so deeply to that esoteric path, it reminds us that even if we don't have a connection to immediate ancestors or family, that we are all truly connected in so many deep ways. Like, it really resonates with me on my loneliest days when I feel like I've just been spit out into this earth with no connection to anyone. These things that we're talking about, creating sacred space, holding on to objects that have been around for millennia, remind us that we are not alone, that we really are all part of one big living organism. And that gives me a little spark of life. That gives me hope. It gives me joy, to feel that connected. That's really what we all want, right? Is to feel this connection, to feel seen, to feel heard. And so when we really bubble down into these moments of sacred divinity, and we set this space where we can step inside, we can touch the vibration of life and be reminded that we are just all part of this big network. So I really dig that about this whole conversation.
You're giving such octopus vibes right now. Like, I'm just seeing you as your PFP, a little happy octopus just reaching its tentacles out into the universe, just touching everything. Absolutely. I totally feel and resonate with everything you're saying. And, Abby, we've been talking about sacred spaces in a way, not that's like limiting them to being inside, but I feel like what you mentioned as it relates to like a sacred space, um, is a place where, special memories are kept. And you mentioned having a photo of your late friend. And this just kind of makes me think like, okay, well, a sacred space is not just a designated area in your house. For some people, a sacred space, and I love these sacred spaces, are out in nature, a specific lake or river or national park or hiking trail or forest, or even like a concert venue. That sounds crazy that a concert venue could be someone's sacred space, but I say that because music and liveliness is sacred and spiritual, for some people. And some people really find themselves, their true selves, in those environments. Some people might say a certain vacation spot or like a childhood home, uh, was their sacred space, or a garden. And I just think it's so incredible and beautiful how it there anywhere can be a sacred space. And what makes the place sacred is this sense of peacefulness, these special memories, and this natural beauty. Um, and I'm just like, that's just giving me all the goosebumps and butterflies.
I love that you mentioned a garden. I do think of some of these other places you're talking about, like, oh, Garden of the Gods, or some of these natural rock formations that take our breath away, that remind us of how small we are, right? And leave us in awe. But a small scale of that are these little pockets of places and spaces. I love to garden, and when my mind was a mess for a couple of years, and under tremendous stress, I just didn't have, as some people say, enough spoons. I didn't have the spoons to garden last year or the year before. I have this rogue patch of spearmint that comes back every year, and that beautiful bitch is I aspire to be that rogue patch of spearmint. Let me tell you, she has endured benign neglect year after year and comes back bigger and stronger and smelling sweeter. You can't walk by my little crazy garden that's falling apart now, but without smelling that spearmint in the summer. So I love that you mentioned gardening, because I, for the first time in a long time, feel that spark, that pull to put some seeds in the dirt and to get my hands dirty, because that is such a sacred act. And definitely you can set your garden up to be such a sacred space. When I'm really in the flow in gardening, I would grow little pumpkins around my fence, like the small little, like, the decorative ones, that you buy for $1 or whatever at the store. But I'd grow them up along the fence because my fence falls apart. And so those pumpkin vines you could wrap around your fence to keep it together. And it's such a, like, witchy, magical thing to do. And it would bring me so much fucking joy. Yeah, I think, and you can tuck little cute secret things that are just for you and your fairies and your toads, right? You can be a 47-year-old woman and turn into a little girl again when you create these sacred spaces, these places that you feel this permission, right, to just explore and to really, like, touch that whimsical vibe deep inside of you that we're always, like, told to brush off or push aside or grow up or whatever, right? I love that sacred spaces give us license, to be free, to feel really liberated, to, like, really acknowledge that the goddess is alive and magic is afoot, damn it.
Oh, goodness. Magic is afoot. I love that you grow little mini pumpkins, or that you used to. I love those little mini pumpkins. They're just so precious. And I love the idea of you using those vines to prop your fence up. I do want to mention, I noticed that we have some people in the listeners who often come and listen. So you are more than welcome. If you want to be a part of the conversation, you're more than welcome to request the mic. There is no pressure at all. But if you're feeling called to come up and talk about what places help you get in touch with what's sacred to you and kind of help you restore and regain a sense of well being, feel free to request the mic. Yeah, all religious traditions emphasize the importance of sacred spaces and spaces set aside for ritual, prayer, meditation, worship. Every kind of spiritual sect and religion has their space and place, and it's important. It reminds us that it's important to connect with the spiritual world. We can get so lost in the sauce of our everyday life, and our sacred space reminds us to kind of drop in with ourselves. And for me, sometimes just walking by my secret space and seeing how disheveled it is just like, oh girl, like it's a reflection of it's a reflection of my spiritual practice. And I've been feeling that a lot lately because I've been incredibly busy, and I've been many areas of my life. And just yesterday, I walked by my spiritual space and I was just like, spiritual to who? It's looking toe up over here. It's dusty. Things need to be washed and refreshed. And saged and incensed. I was like, oh Lord. So I'm going to be intentional about as we're going to be shifting into spring before you know it. Holy cow! And we're going to have this time change coming as the new season approaches. I want to get intentional about like dedicating time to be mindful in my sacred space and not have it be an afterthought, like make it a part of my routine. Like how I was saying, how my husband lays his clothes out for the gym in the morning. Like I need to set myself up for, maybe I need to start leaving snacks in my sacred space to incentivize me to. Hey Jana.
Let me just tell you that it is literally spirit that asked me up on this stage. I did not hit anything. I was browsing Twitter, and then all of a sudden my audio changed in the way that I know that it does when I request to come up on the stage somewhere. So I guess I'm going to chat with you guys about some of my sacred spaces because Spirit told me to and literally forced me onto the stage. So here I am. Obviously, first of all, I was commenting in the chat in the little box down there. Um, all of what you guys have been saying are just like making my heart sing. Yes to getting stopped by TSA, and also yes to picking up shells and sticks and twigs and whatever rocks and crystals and things you find, and then creating beautiful spaces. I cannot tell you how many times everywhere I go, I'm just one of those people who creates those kinds of spaces. And around my home, I have multiple surfaces that are just covered in crystals and, sticks and shells and things of that nature. Feathers that I always find. And I've never found a feather and not kept it wherever I am. So, I think it's important to remember when you're creating any kind of sacred space, to just be really intentional. And like Sierra was saying, it's okay to go through or maybe it was Abby, I don't remember. It's okay to kind of go through a season of something and be like, maybe the stick is just like a stick and it needs to go outside. I don't know. And sometimes that happens, especially if you're a massive collector like me. It rarely ever happens with crystals, but sometimes they got to go back to the earth too. And that's an important thing to do. But I want to say specifically about creating sacred space. I'm somebody who has studied a lot of metaphysics, and the practices of that can really be very, very helpful. So, a lot of times if you are if you're cleaning up your space and you're trying to create more sacredness in your space, it can be very, very helpful to call on your angels, archangels, and any of the ancestors and guides, teachers, healers that are with you to really, really make that space sort of purified, especially after you've just cleansed it. So whether that's cleansing with smoke and incense or cleansing like you need to dust that shit off, Sierra, then, whatever it is, it can be very helpful to just be like, hey, I'm here, I'm activated, I'm present. Can you help me to just stay in this clean vibration that I'm trying to really, amplify? And also, if you can you maybe keep the dust off my shit? Because it's annoying to have to go back to it over and over again. But, I would say the things that are sacred for each of us are unique and individual. So find the things that feel sacred to you, and, give them as much reverence and love as you can. And then watch how that kind of amplifies in your life, watch how it just kind of multiplies in ways and spaces that you didn't necessarily expect it to. So I hope that I did spirit well, did spirit right by saying all of that. But I love you both so much, and thank you as always for having these conversations. I'm so impressed that you guys are on episode 30. I don't know how we got here, but I am proud of both of you, and grateful to be here as always.
I love that. And I love you, Jana. And I love the point that you brought up about asking and calling upon our ancestors and the ascended masters, and yeah, absolutely inviting that space. As you said, if we've taken the time to cleanse it and create that space and set the tone, then absolutely tap into that energy. I think that's a really beautiful reminder. Spirit called you in here for a good reason, and I appreciate that, and love that happened. That's hysterical, but it doesn't surprise me one bit. How are you tonight, Jody?
Hello, hello. I'm doing great. I love this conversation about sacred space. I think that it is very important to create space intentionally for meditation, mental health, breaks, or just to, whatever you need as an individual, because everybody's different and everybody's practice is different and everybody's, perspective is different. So, I just wanted to pop up and share the fact that number one, I love this conversation. I'm a big fan of mindful business. And additionally, I would say if I were to say I am creating a sacred space. It's in my backyard and it's a fire pit and it's about 6 feet, around in circumference. And I got some mountain rocks like brought in. I saved them from the side of the road, right? And I love just sitting on them and I feel grounded. And where I live, there's not a lot of elevation, and elevation is in my chart, as I've been told by one of my guides. So when I discovered that I had the opportunity to buy rocks from the mountain, I was like, okay, that's what I need in my backyard is rocks from the mountain, these big boulders. And I just sit on them and I light this big old fire in my 6 foot, you know, fire pit, and I dug it out myself and I put a lot of care into it, and it's a work in progress, right? But so am I. And that's what's beautiful about, those sacred spaces that we create, because they can be a work in progress along with ourselves being a work in progress. And it's about that commitment to that space and to ourselves. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that it's different for everyone and it means something different for everyone, but it's all the same energetically. So I appreciate the time to express myself. I love you all. I love this space. Big fan, and I look forward to talking more later. Thanks.
Oh, yay. It's such a pleasure to have both Jana and Jody. Yay! Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I love that your sacred space is in your backyard. We recently, my husband and I got married in our backyard. And before we did that, we installed a nice patio. And sometimes on a beautiful day, just like sitting out on the patio in my backyard and observing, we have some really beautiful wildlife, some birds, nice blue jays and cardinals that frequent our trees. That can be my sacred space sometimes. So I super feel that, Jody. Did that elicit any feelings for you, Abby?
Well, I wanted to say I love you too, Jody. I'm so glad that you came up, and I love that you mentioned building a fire pit. I did the same thing over the course of a couple of years. I started one fall and finished it the following spring, and I had forgotten about that absolutely being a sacred space for me, especially in the last, like as I mentioned before, the 6 months of immense change for me, from August till now. Boy, the end of summer, fall, early winter, I used the hell out of my fire pit that I built for myself. And isn't there something so gratifying about building the damn fire pit yourself, but then building the fire that goes in the fire pit? That alone connects you to that primordial energy. And there is something immensely sacred to me about sitting around a fire, whether it be in absolute solitude or with a group of people you really connect with. So I love that you mentioned your fire pit being a sacred space for you. I love that you brought in, some repurposed mountain rock to connect you to that mountain energy. I think that's so fucking cool, and right on. What a perfect addition to this talk about sacred space.
Something that I was just thinking about is I love when people have things that appeal to all the senses in their sacred space. And by that, I mean, stuff you can smell, stuff that's beautiful to look at, stuff you can touch. Like, I'm a very sensory person. And my crystals, other than just being beautiful and using them to set intentions and their energies, is sometimes I just like the feeling of touching and holding them and feeling their texture. And sometimes I'll sit and meditate and I'll just kind of hold a stone in my hand, and just feeling it within my hand can make my living room floor transform into my sacred space as I kind of go somewhere else mentally. So yeah, I'm digging this combo. We are approaching like our last 10 minutes or so. So just kind of putting a time check out there. I do appreciate y'all coming and hanging with us for episode 30. And Jana, I can't believe we're at episode 30 either. I was, when I said it at the beginning of this episode, I was like, oh my goodness. And we've done these pretty consecutive. Maybe there was a week or two here or there that we skipped. So that's like 30 consecutive weeks of chatting with Abby about all my favorite stuff, which has been really fun.
I don't have a clue how we got here either. I love that you said that, Jana. Like, time turns so elastic. Whether you're having fun or not, it flies right the fuck by. And these are my favorite conversations. I'm always so energized when we get together every week. And I love when our friends come and hang out with us and talk about our favorite things right along with us. I like that you mentioned really the appreciation of kind of having different elements. I love the idea of having all the elements represented, especially on like an altar space. And an altar space is often what ends up in a sacred space, right? And again, sometimes we have different places and spaces for these different things, but I love having all of the elements represented. And it could be something as simple as, table salt or in a candle, if you're thinking about earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. So I love that you mentioned that. And I also love and agree with that idea of you can transform or transport yourself right into this place, just through the power of your mind. And it's helpful to have some tangible thing that makes you feel that sacred energy. If you can hold it in your hand or put a prayer shawl or something over you, over your shoulders, that kind of transports you into that feeling, into that space. You don't really even have to have a lot of physical space carved out in your home. If you have these couple of items that feel really sacred and special to you, and you're able to, in your mind's eye, step into that non-ordinary reality, right? Kind of, as you said, you can transform your living room into a different place just through the power of your mind and the feelings that holding on to those sacred items really elicit in your body and your energy field. So I think really, as we've talked tonight, we really have determined that it's kind of like home is where your heart is. Your sacred space is where your intention is. Your sacred space can be right where you are in this very moment, right? You can get under your covers and grab your favorite crystal, and shift your breath and your mind's eye, and you can go to your secret garden whenever you want to. And I think that's such an encouraging thing to kind of take away from this space. And as we mentioned, it doesn't have to be a fancy crystal. Go look outside. Jan and I find treasures all the time, right? Might be a stick to you, but it's a magic, bone piece to me that's going to be really cool for this thing I'm wanting to create, or whatever it might be. So, use your imagination, slow down and look at the magic and beauty and wonder that surrounds you. And, you, like a little crow, you can collect all kinds of things for your sacred space, without any money, without any real effort. So I hope that everyone kind of. I know I took away some different things and some new perspectives, or at least some good reminders, of kind of shifting my awareness in different ways. What about you, Sierra?
Absolutely. Yes. As I keep saying, there's no right or wrong way to make a sacred space as long as you focus on what inspires you and kind of gets you in the right vibe to self reflect and kind of motivates you to get into this more meditative and mindful space. I'm going to pass it over to Jana, whose hand is up. You don't have to raise your hand, honey.
I like the structure. I like the safety of knowing that I will get called on. Um, yeah, I just wanted to say, in regards to these found treasures, in this weird reality that we live in, we make a lot of things have meaning that don't necessarily, and we make things that have meaning maybe not have meaning. We tend to get a little bit lost in those thoughts at times. And so I want to say that if you find something in your physical reality that seems to have meaning to you, just let it. Let it have all of the meaning that it possibly can, and let it mean everything to you for as long as it does. And then when you're ready to be like, maybe it doesn't have the meaning that I thought it did, maybe it isn't, as big of a deal in this fake, matrix that we're making up in our minds, anyways, in this like virtual reality world. Maybe that's okay. So I think that's really where the sacredness for me comes in. As Abby was speaking, I was just thinking about how, like, all of these found treasures, it's the same as thoughts that we choose. It's the same as people that we cling to, or, beliefs that we identify with. I identify oftentimes with a seashell as much as I do with a human being. So just let that weird connection to this planet that we're on. That's rose quartz energy, right? Love for self, love for others, love for the planet. Let that rose quartz energy, that sort of divine feminine part of you within you, whether you are male or female or, somewhere in between those things or something outside of those things, let that just, really reverberate for you and help to amplify you, because the more you let yourself do that, the more you'll find yourself on your own progress journey, being more kind to yourself and being more accepting of the other weird little things that you tend to over identify with and, want to learn to love in the ways that you do maybe love that twig or bone or rock.
Go ahead, Jody.
Oh, Jana, when you were talking, I was just like over here giggling and jumping for joy because I feel like everything you're saying just embodies like the childlike, innocent nature of the human spirit. And I think that's so important because we let it go. I have a 7-year-old son and I watch him. Yes, he takes to these like objects that I'm like, really? This is what you care about today. But I mean, I really am like, really, this is what you care about today because I empathize with that. And I think it's so beautiful and innocent that a stick can be a best friend or, whether animate or inanimate, it doesn't matter. The fact is that, finding joy in those objects in the moment, like you said, it's so innocent and mindful in the moment. And then when it passes, then yeah, you can let it go and move on with your life, but without judgment or um yeah, boundaries in that sense. As long as it's safe and it's not unhealthy, then love the things that you love, collect the things that you love, and just enjoy your life in the moment. And I think that's a beautiful message. So thanks, Gianna, for sharing that. And it made me smile because you know how I love the childlike nature of the universe.
I love the energy that you both bring. I know that you both co-host another Twitter space together. Your metaphysics and metaphysical. Is that what it's called? I hope I got it right. You guys,
Metaverse and metaphysics.
metaverse and metaphysics. Okay. Yeah, you have a great like synergy and vibe, and it's just such a pleasure to have you both at the same time. Like I know we've had you both separately, but I'm not sure that we've had you both as speakers at the same time. So I feel like we're like this fantastic four of like mindful Twitter space hosts. posts, just like coming out for our debut. And I'm just picturing us with our hands on our hips in like a Superman pose. Bringing all of our presence and mindfulness to Twitter, which is probably really ridiculous and dramatic, and a sign that I need to go to bed soon. Is that what you're visualizing, Abby?
Super women. We are super women in our superhero costumes with our hands on our hips and our crystals and our we are saving the metaphysical world in the metaverse, one breath and one conversation, one Twitter space at a fucking time. I love it. And yes, metaverse. Well, shit. Now I'm saying it wrong, but it's on Thursday nights, and they've been at it for fucking 60 weeks almost. You ladies are killing it over there, and I totally agree that the four of us are a force to be reckoned with. It's so much fun to talk and to vibe, and to share Women's Day with some of the baddest ass women in Web3 that I have the pleasure of knowing.
Okay, so now I'm inspired. We're going to have to connect offline about having like a mindful business, metaverse, and metaphysics like mashup space where it's all four of us and we pick something really really out there. And I know this is going to be within reach for all of us. And just go at it at length. I will be in contact about this.
We can't leave out our other co-hosts, though. We got 2 more co-hosts that we can't leave out. So we'll talk offline, but the 2 of us are in and the 4 of us are definitely in. We're actually having a meeting in 2 minutes, so perfect timing.
The more the merrier. Fantastic. I love it. Thank y'all for hanging out with us tonight. This has been fun. What is our topic next week? Let me refresh myself. We have a fun lineup this month. Okay, so next week we're going to talk about freelance work. So I'm excited about this. I know this is something that Abby and I maybe all of us up on the stage. I know you, Jana, as well. Freelance and contract work, kind of taking your skills and your expertise, and working as a contractor, working on your own, doing project-based work. We're going to talk about that next week. It's been a while since we've had an entrepreneur focused episode, so I'm excited about that. And then our final episode of the month on the 29th, our final Wednesday, we'll talk about finding peace in solitude, which sounds a little heavy, but Abby and I both feel that you can find a lot of peace and power in time spent alone. Maybe this is something that we've all had the chance to reflect on, especially during the pandemic this last few years. While you can find peace and power, obviously, you can also find isolation. And we're going to talk about how we can find more peace, and less loneliness. So I'm excited for the rest of this month. I hope everybody has a fantastic evening. Thank you again for hanging out. Any closing thoughts before I close the space, Abby?
Just want to say thanks so much again to the ladies for coming up to speak and just for a beautiful energy in the room. Good to see our friend Frenchie down there. And I loved our conversation, and I'm going to settle into my sacred space before I drift off to sleep tonight and say many, many prayers of thanks for my beautiful friends in this space, including all of you. Thanks so much, Sarah, for hosting.
All right. That is episode 30 in the books. We did it. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic evening, morning, afternoon, night, whatever it is, wherever you are. We will see you next week for episode 31 of Mindful Business next Wednesday at 7 Eastern. See you soon.